welcome to the ICT Pulse podcast. I'm Michelle Marius, your host and the editor and publisher of ICT Pulse, the online platform where we discuss ICT issues from a Caribbean perspective. In an article we published on ICT Pulse in January on why more Caribbean people are not video gamers, we noted that globally, the video games industry was estimated to be worth nearly $160 billion in 2020 and is projected to exceed $200 billion by 2023. However, and although most of us have played video games, even if it's just on our mobile phones, for those who live in the Caribbean, we may not fully appreciate the sheer scale of the industry and consequently what might be happening here on the ground in the region. To help us to start to pull back the curtain on gaming in the Caribbean, we're delighted to have Glen Henry and Graham Reid of the Jamaica Game Developer Society, which is a coalition of projects and people in support of Jamaica's video game communities and a key advocate for the emerging local game development sector. Glen and Graham, welcome to the podcast.
Hey,
Hi.
thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for joining me today. And if you can just start off by giving us a sense as to how big is game development in Jamaica, and if you can share some insights on what might be happening in the wider Caribbean region.
Okay. Graham, you mind if I take this one?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So just to give some context about like the game developer scene locally, even in the wider Caribbean, it is mostly aspirational hobbies. That means there are people who are interested and would love to make games. That is like their dream. But for one reason or another, be it financial difficulty, be it educational gaps, they haven't necessarily made the jump. So they're at varying levels of starting, or even if they have started, it's normally in like a hobbyist kind of capacity. Bridging the gap and basically jumping to that professional mindset is a bit difficult right now. So we have a large ish or a growing community of people who are trying to skill up, trying to move into a professional space. That is where we are right now. Anything else to add there, Graham?
No, I mean, I think you pretty much covered it. Like the interest is definitely slowly but surely growing. But I would definitely define everybody or most people right now as more in the hobbyist space.
Okay, so well, Graham, let's start with you now. For what might be some of the skills and resources need to build a video game? Because clearly, all video games are not made equal. You have those that you can probably just do build for mobile phones, whereas those that probably you might want to be used on some sort of console, PlayStation, Xbox, or the like.
Right. So that's a very, very broad question, but as you rightfully said, you have a very wide range of where games can actually be played. Um, so you can do anything from being the visuals for a game, the actual game design, the programming, which I think is probably the best place for us, the Jamaicans, to start. You can do just writing. There are some games you can make in this program called Twine, where it's just choice based, and you're just writing text, and then that's the whole game. So I mean, it really depends on, I would say, the team that you're working with, or if you want to work by yourself, it just depends on how many skills you want to acquire. But there's a lot of different avenues into the game development industry, I think.
Glenn?
Just to build on what Graham just mentioned in terms of varying skill set, right? Uh, there are a lot of hats in game development. It is an industry in itself, and there are a lot of disciplines that aspiring hobbyists or just practitioners can focus on and build up. Like Graham mentioned, there's a visual aspect. You have your 2D artists, which can then be broken off into character designers, concept artists, environmental artists, right? And then you have 3D artists, which are going to be your texture designers. Those are building out the texture maps that move across like 3D models. And you have your 3D modelers who are building out the actual rigs that are being used and animated, and the character that you're navigating the game world with. You have your audio, which are going to be your composers, your audio designers who are in charge for the sound, the music, the beeps, the boops, all of those type of things. You have your narrative designers; those are the people who are going to be ensuring that the story flows and it's engaging and you have a reason to continue playing.
I love how much more in depth you're going with this than I did.
I know I'm just going very deep because it just triggered, like, while you're talking, all of this kind of just triggered in my brain. Just like how fleshed out it is. It's a very
Yeah, it's a lot.
heavy question because you realize I haven't even touched on like designers and developers, which are what people normally think of first when they think of game development. They think about the programming and the designers. So it's very broad. It can be we can have an entire discussion by itself, just talking about the skills needed.
Oh, and something neither of us actually touched on, Glenn, were the resources.
Yeah,
You
and
can make a
resources.
game with just a pen and paper if you really want to. You
Yeah,
can make card games, physical board games, all the different things, or of course, just need a computer if you want to make digital software.
exactly. It. There are a lot of tools, there are a lot of skills, and there are a lot of resources that are available. But I think what I personally trying to build up to right now is like becoming a game developer. It is possible where you are right now. It really is about just having the, I guess, will, the perseverance to kind of
Right.
navigate and build with what you have now.
Understood. And I mean, as you're talking, I think what came through to me is really to, I guess, for individuals who might be interested in game development, is to really critically assess the skills that they have,
Hmm.
because you may not necessarily want to be build think that you want to build a game for a console, but you only starting with, well, I mean, you may start with pen and paper, but pen and paper is just to probably kind of outline something, but you need to put a team together in terms of testing and even maybe the platforms that one might need to use to build the games. All of these things may have costs in addition to whatever effort might be required. So I got the sense though that you need to be realistic about what your skills are, and consequently the resources that might need to come to bear if one decides that one wants to build a game.
Exactly, exactly. Meaning it's useful and it's required to have that kind of self awareness and that analysis. But uh, just in terms of, I know I kind of rambled on about the different disciplines within game design itself and the skills therein, but I kind of want to make it a point not to make it seem as if all of this is 100% needed to make any type of game. And if you don't have these things, it doesn't make sense to start. Right?
Right.
Understood. But let me ask you, because here it is that we are trying to have a conversation about game development in the region. And Glen, in one of our earlier conversations, we really looked at the fact that this is a very lucrative industry. It's big. It is probably bigger than movies and maybe even music combined. But the point though is that we often want to think about, how can we move the region forward in economic benefits. We have, people who are unemployed, underemployed, even those who have the technical skills that might be required for video game development, not necessarily just the coding and so on. But I'm trying to understand how we might be able to leverage that in the Caribbean. What do you think we could or should do?
So you kind of just stepped into my bailiwick, my passion area. So, Graham, you mind if I ramble a little bit longer?
Yeah, man, go for it.
All right. So, one of the things that I'm actually very passionate about is that Jamaica, like, just in terms of creativity, it's kind of a powerhouse, right? We've kind of dominated any creative field that we, right? Music, art, theater. We've just stepped in, we've owned it. It's ours. And video games and interactive media by itself represent this weird and fun new uncharted area. So I don't see why, Jamaica and the wider Caribbean as well can't, step in, because it's not only about, you know, showcasing the quintessential Caribbean flavor, right? Because, there are those stories that are, at a glance, that is Jamaican. right? Or at a glance, you know that from the Caribbean. It's very obvious, it's the wind, the water, the beaches. There's that. But within ourselves, we have all these other stories that we can tell. Right? We have all these other experiences that we can draw from and make, these interactive worlds that are unique to us and tell our stories in different ways. So just in that by itself, I think there's merit. But when you're thinking about like the economic impact, we're currently an untapped market in the digital landscape. I think in one of the reports I read earlier, I think the cost per install, which is metrically used for how much the rate and like ad spend for mobile apps, the cost per install for the Caribbean was like, it was really low. I think it was like $0.33. The lower it is, the better it is. Meaning you get a higher return for ad spend for the Caribbean versus other territories. That's because, well, advertisers tend to ignore here. We're on that market. So who better to take advantage of that than Caribbean players? We're going to wait until a VC firm coming out of Toronto does it, or are we going to do it ourselves?
Yeah, we need to not wait on that.
So yeah, that's my viewpoint there. And then of course I've touched on all the other skills that can go into a game from a full AAA standpoint. Those are jobs that can be made here. So yeah, that's my gutch about the business opportunity that game development represents.
So a lot of it is in respect to the jobs and um, I guess the potential for wealth creation. If the games originate from the region, because we do have unique stories to tell, you're saying, and I guess cultural, unique attributes as well, whatever that might mean.
I believe we have the creative output and we have the economic opportunity to really make a splash.
Okay. So what then do you think is holding us back? I mean, we say it's lucrative. The region, Jamaica has strengths, but what do you think are those strengths? If you can just pinpoint a few, but probably more importantly, what are the weaknesses? Because it looks as if we haven't begun to focus on this in any meaningful way.
I have thoughts about this, but I'm going to take a couple seconds to put it together. I don't know if you want to chime in here, Graham.
Yeah, so I think probably, at least from my perspective, one of the biggest things that are holding us back like all of the Caribbean is the lack of knowledge, because there's so many people that will see games and not realize it's something that they can do, that they can actually make themselves or be a part of. They might say they might say Glen and say, "Oh, Glen does everything. I can't compete with Glen," not realizing that, like he said, he wears a lot of hats, or I wear a lot of hats, but they don't realize that, oh, I'm a writer, I can contribute to games. I'm an artist, I can contribute to games. They don't realize that it's all a team, or it can be a team effort. And also a lot of people don't recognize, like they'll see the huge grossing games like the Candy Crushes and Flappy Birds and all these things, and some people might think it's easy to make a game and just make a bunch of money, and then they might try it somehow or try to hire some external people from abroad, and then realize, oh, it doesn't work like that, and then get turned off from the industry entirely. So I think it's just about knowledge and also just more people getting into it from the right mind space.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for that, Graham. It kind of helped me kind of put that together. That mindset is really what I think is the crux from my standpoint, right? I mentioned earlier that there's a lot of hobbyists, a lot of aspirational hobbyists, right? Those are people who play games and like, they play the Halo 3, they play the Call of Duty, they play the FIFA. And that's where the interest starts, right? And so I want to do that. Imagine if that was my day job and trying to put together a team, put together, the skills to kind of make that a reality. And that is where they run into problems. Meaning there are expectations and knowledge gaps that exist within that transitionary period, such as how do you go about securing funding, right? How do you go about deciding what type of game you want to make? All of these things are in there's basic industry knowledge, right? It's hard to gather that as without some form of formal industry.
And it's a lot together too.
Yeah, you're not going to get that through school. You're going to have to be one of those outlier individuals who are going to sit down and have fun reading marketing reports at 11 p.m. at night, um, or
Yeah,
following game industry news, the unfun part where XYZ CEO was stepping down for this reason and that reason and etc. There is a unfun, unsexy business aspect that needs to be highlighted and that is normally overlooked. Right? There's also the aspect that making games, as fun as it is, it's not. Making games is a lot less fun than playing games. It's still work
it still works for sure. Yeah,
that has to be considered. So it's just all of these little considerations that have to be thought of and really factored into any creative endeavor that gets overlooked. If you talk to any of the artists locally, like visual artists or musicians, they would have benefited from past artists. They would have
right.
explained how the industry works. We don't have that.
And it's also very those art forms are very singular. Like if I'm a painter, I can reference other paintings, or I can ask for critiques from other painters, or same with musicians, same with writers, anything. But games are just so broad. It's a lot harder.
Exactly. I'm not sure if I added as much value than Graham a while ago because I kind of rambled a bit. But
No worries, no worries.
Now when you're good.
Okay, so let's just step back because this seems then like a good place to ask about, Jamaica Game Developer Society from the perspective that here it is that, as you say, lack of knowledge. And I'm hoping that in telling us a little bit more about the society, let me hear what it's about and some of its objectives and members and the like.
so on the website, the JGDS, it doesn't roll off the tongue very well. Um,
Indeed.
yeah, it's the girls. But the Jamaica Game Developer Society started on the website in 2013. It is not a formal organization in the same way that the JCS is. Right now, it is very much an informal group of people who are just interested in interactive media. It started in 2013, really and truthfully, as just this consistent collective of like 5 people. It was myself, Graham, and two of our other friends. Three of our other friends? Yeah. And we were just interested in making games. We kept on talking about it. We kept on linking each other articles. Started in a Facebook group, and then we kind of grew out to the Facebook group.
Oh yeah, it started on Facebook. Wow.
Yeah, where did we go next, Graham? Was it?
I think we were at Facebook and I went to like Hangouts and then Slack maybe. I don't remember. We've been all over the place.
Yeah, we kind of been bouncing all over the place, but right now we're on Discord, which is it's a community chat application that is at least initially, it was primarily for gamers. It offers a lot more options and it feels a little less stuffy than Slack. And I think we're all pretty much satisfied there right now. One of the things that we prioritized in the group itself was at least participating in game jams, as well as working on our own individual projects. And one of those game jams that we participated in was a global game jam, which is a yearly hackathon that is distributed in different jam sites across the world. And we would basically enter every year, and one or two of us would submit a game. Eventually, we were able to partner with Listen Me Studios, which is an animation studio. And when I say partner, what I really mean is that they opened up their office for us to kind of just spend the weekend hacking at that game. They liked the idea, um, and they were just nice to us. And then from there, the following year, we ended up, I think that was 2018. And then following year, somebody was very, very nice to Carmack and they opened their one of their halls to us. So we ended up having a actual physical location. So that's 2019. Then 2020, we did it again. More people started getting help from the university. Their event planning students would come in and help us organize everything. And then that was 2020, and then 2021 pandemic. we still got help, we still partner with them, but we transitioned back to doing it online because previously we were doing it almost 100% online. So that is kind of the track in terms of officially what happened with the JGDS in terms of a year by year. But in terms of ethos and point behind it all, it's really to just be a community for people who are interested in this type of stuff, right? We mentioned that education and that gap is hard to cover. We're hoping that by being a community, by being a place where people can ask questions and get answers, that would help stimulate the local community. And by giving them support for their own projects, we can kind of, showcase, up and coming talent and, things of that nature. And then just by being a singular group, we can advocate for ourselves a bit better. It's people are more willing to listen to a group of game developers than a single game developer, right? Am I missing anything there, Graham?
No, I think essentially right now our main objective is really just to be a community and be an active community, I should say, because we've been a community since 2013, but it's been just like Glenn said, five of us and people dropping in and out here and there. But once we can actually be an active community, consistently growing, consistently having people partaking in the game jams, sharing their progress, all these different things, then it's like we can take the next step and help to get more eyes on Jamaican game developers and game development in Jamaica on a whole and the Caribbean.
Understood.
And I just need to also state that we started at 5, and we're currently at over 100 people on the Discord.
Okay. That's impressive. So what is it going to take for you all to probably become, I guess, a bit more formalized and probably, I don't know whether or not, have some sort of strategy, path, roadmap or something? What might that take?
In one word, I would say consistency.
Yeah, consistency is definitely the thing. Just getting people to, once we get more people kind of moving onto the aspirational status into
Right, right.
shipping and releasing titles and working on that muscle, that finishing muscle. Um, that's a separate thing I can rant for a while about in terms of
Same.
people finishing projects. But I think once we get there, we can start, applying for IGDA, that's the International Game Developer Association. We can apply for emergent status, emergent capital, and we can get access to resources and support through them, as well as, probably apply for a nonprofit and kind of grow the, the organization, a bit further and offer like financial support to its members.
But then I kind of wonder the extent to which, because as you said, you have a lot of hobbyists and, aspirational interest.
Mhm.
But so it may be a question of most of the persons may not necessarily be particularly interested or serious, let me say serious instead, in terms of pursuing game development as a profession.
Mhm.
They might be happy to, enjoy the atmosphere. Yes, they might sort of work on their own sort of games, and as you say, they don't finish it doesn't really matter. They like being part of this group. So I'm just wondering whether or not one might one might still just remain this sort of informal setting indefinitely.
All right. So one of the things I'm trying to push, and I say I'm a lot, but I think Graham also echoes this, is
Yeah.
we do want to have a community where, hobbyists can come in and be a part of the community, but we also want to give resources to those who want to take that professional track. So one of the things that we do within the Discord is that we have a couple of threads that pass on, consistent industry event news that's passed on. We have links to resources for funding, links to resources for marketing strategies, links to resources for conferences and things of that nature. We have uh, what else? We have other like discussions about the strategies that we've undertaken for our own personal projects, and I try to be very transparent with my numbers in terms of sales and stuff like that and how much money I am making, So the idea is, yes, you can be a hobbyist, but we're also trying to move in a more professional track. We're trying to showcase that this is a viable option, and we're doing that by trying to be quote unquote exemplars, like or slash heroes or whatever it is. Showcase that we're not just trying to talk the talk; we're trying to walk the walk and hope that other people will follow.
Right. Yeah, because some people, myself included, like when they start as hobbies, they don't realize that, oh, this can actually be a whole career.
Mhm.
And so when they see other Jamaicans, other Caribbean developers actually releasing games, and oh, that's paying for their bills, that's paying their rent, that's actually helping them to stay afloat in life, then it's like, oh, I can do more than just be a hobbyist. I can actually pursue this full time. But a lot of people are afraid to take that step because they don't really, they might see it in America or see it in Japan or wherever and not really realize that it's a global thing. It's not just limited to abroad.
Exactly. One other thing that I want to mention before I neglect it. One of the things that we've initiatives that we launched late last year is a crash course series where we're inviting industry professionals to come in and present
Yeah, that's
to
been a big
members
one.
within the community, just to cover different disciplines that people might not necessarily be aware of. So things like that.
Okay. Okay, so let me ask a couple of questions because I I'm curious. How are you aware of, and maybe even yourselves, are any of the developers within your ambit making, money? And I guess money. I don't want to say, I'm trying to figure out whether or not can they support themselves from games, or it probably brings in a tidy sum at the end of each month that could offset maybe the cost of internet service or something.
Yeah, yeah, and know of at least one developer, local developer, who has a mobile project that has been making some substantial income from ads. It's not anything necessary to be a full time job, at least in its current incarnation, but it's enough to offset some bills. I mean, this is just a game that he released for free on Android, right? It's not ported to everywhere. Last I checked. Myself, I've been able to leverage my games directly for some side income or the skills that I've showcased in those games for contract projects as well to kind of just flesh out my the Sprite Range Studios business, my studios business. I think Graham is probably the furthest along in terms of just professional status because he has his current project, which he's in talks with certain parties. I'm not sure if he's able to say
Not yet.
yet. He's in talk with certain parties about his current project, and he's getting funding to release it or getting backing to release it on a very popular platform, but he has no leverage to say it. What was the name of the game again, Graham?
Super Space Club. So yeah, I think speaking for myself, I am on a trajectory to be able to sustain myself full time with game development, but it's definitely not like it's not an overnight thing. It's you can't just jump in and be like, okay, I'm going to do this. It's definitely you have to take your time to learn, be a part of the industry, actually just do the work essentially. Like Glenn rightfully said, it's fun, but it's also a lot of work. And I think that's the part that people have to understand and accept.
Indeed.
And there's definitely definitely easier ways to make money than game development. So it's if you don't love, I wouldn't even say love game development. If you don't love what you do, if you're like whatever aspect you can contribute to it, then I wouldn't I wouldn't pursue this just to try and make money.
Okay, well, and I mean, fair enough, because, and I think with almost anything, it requires effort and it requires commitment, and certainly to secure the gains, probably the bigger the gains, the more effort you need to make sometimes. But in terms of now games and Caribbean games, or games developed by Caribbean developers, is there any sort of directory repository of which you are aware? Because I'm thinking that, for many of us who might be, loyal to the region and loyal to those who are, fighting the good fight, we might at least want to, one, be aware of the games that are available, that have been developed by Caribbean gamers, and maybe to support them if, it is within our means to do so. what's the state of any sort of directory?
All right.
I think
So go ahead, Graham.
I was gonna say, as a society, we want to start to compile all of the games that we know of. But as far as I know, Glenn has a YouTube playlist of just all these different beautiful trailers of Jamaican and Caribbean made games, right, Glenn?
Yeah, so it's actually a personal project of mine just to categorize and collect every local or Caribbean made game into one repository. Right now, I have a YouTube playlist for that. It's still in progress. In addition to that, we are updating our website to include um, all the Game Jam games and entries that were submitted over the years. So people could go in and see what's been made in those hackathons and see, how we've skilled up and grown over the years. So it's a work in progress. We're trying to pull all that together. So community aspect comes a little bit stronger.
Yeah, I would love if you would share the link with us here at ICT Pulse for at least the directory.
Yeah, I'm hesitant
Right?
to make a single directory because I don't want to leave anybody out. And I know that since the community is so new, the sector is so new, I don't want to be the authority.
You don't have to be the authority. I think that what we're looking for is somewhere that at least people who are creating games may want to be able to list have their games listed as well. So I don't think you need to be the final arbiter, but certainly I think to just help us to collate those things and you know create some sort of way that if a gamer from another Caribbean country in particular might want to say, listen, I've done this, it's on Google Play Store, you can get it on for Apple and so on, that they can write in or send you the information, or send whether or not is the society, since I don't know whether or not you might want to attach it personally to yourself and say, well, listen, we just want to be able to compile this. And there may be time to time where games that were created 5-10 years ago, yes, they might still be available, but or the developer pulls it because it needs to be upgraded, or they no longer want it to be publicly available. So it will need to be up to be maintained and updated on a regular basis anyway.
Okay.
So I hope you will at least share it and at least help us all, I think, to become more aware of the games that are being developed in the region. Because sometimes you're looking for very simple things, let's say for the Caribbean, and you go on, let's say something like Google Play, and you can see that there are a whole lot of games with like the Jamaican flag or some sort of Caribbean flavor, but you have no sense as to whether or not it was something that was developed in the region, or something, you don't know much about it. So it would be lovely if, I think, we have something that we can, a resource that we can access, that would give us that kind of details.
All right. All right. Well, I'll be sure once we finalize everything, I'll be sure to share with you, share with ICT Pulse, whatever we manage to cobble together.
Thank you so much. All right, so let's just, I guess, change gears a little bit and probably begin to talk about the game industry and the Caribbean. I'm wondering, and it is coming to me more and more, because I have been looking at some projects, especially with education, because all of the digital learning, remote learning, and the challenges that that entails outside of the devices, but even in terms of content, and even teachers struggling to fully leverage the digital modality of teaching, because they just have not necessarily been trained for all of the learning to take place on this platform. And I was thinking about it and wondered about whether or not developers and that community, do you think that there is the mindset is sufficiently open to build games where there is a need for games? So I'm thinking probably like for education, but also in the tourism space, since with the coronavirus, a lot of our tourism industries have been shut. But I just wonder whether or not, if from your experience, that gamers are prepared, I'm sorry, game developers are prepared to build based on needs as opposed to where their own interests might lie. Graham, let me hear from you, since Glenn had been taking a lot of the questions.
Yeah, stop rambling, Glenn. No, I'm joking. um, yeah, so I think there. this all comes back to the knowledge, I think, because a lot of early developers they might want to make their dream game or just make like something that they're interested in. But if you once you start to develop a pattern of actually finishing games like Glen was mentioning, it's actually a lot easier to then say, oh, I see a need here. There's a need for a game that will highlight Jamaica's tourism or highlight something about education or what have you. And it becomes less of a selfish practice, for lack of a better way to put it. But there definitely is a lot of room to do all of that. The thing for me is there has to be a balance of making something that's helpful and also something that's actually exciting to you, because otherwise you can make like a an educational math game, but it can be very soulless, and so it won't be enjoyable. It won't be. It'll just feel like a thing that someone just made just because they're paid to make it, as opposed to something where it'll actually be enjoyable because someone put actual energy and heart into it.
Yeah, I agree with Graham there. That there's definitely ways in which tourism and education and needs based or needs focused development uh, can benefit from interactive media. I'm a little bit more towards the angle of I am approaching this question a little bit carefully because education games have this very bad rap of pandering. Like they're not necessarily fun or engaging. It's very transparent, and then kids just don't engage, don't play them. They don't engage them, right? So it's hard to make educational games or educational anything really.
Yeah,
And when the goal is very transparent, people tend to bounce off it really, really, really quickly. And kids aren't stupid, right? They know that if you put them in front of this game, that what you're trying to do, which is get them to read. And if they don't want to read, they're not going to read. But navigating that, identifying and navigating that need is something that, gets honed over a period of time of finishing and making games. But outside of that, I think there is value in the idea of play by itself
right,
because it is one of the most natural ways in which kids learn, right? It's the most natural way in which anybody learns, really and truthfully. And not every bit of media and every action has to be geared towards sharpening some kind of real life applied skill. Right? There can be joy and value in just taking a break and gaining some kind of mastery over some arbitrary system.
right. And also I think to add to that, Glenn, there's a lot of games where you do learn a lot from them without them trying to teach you something. For example, if you think of Microsoft Flight Simulator, that was a very popular game last year, especially because the whole game is about flying from point A to point B with very realistic maps, and nobody could fly last year. And so, yeah, it's a game you're learning to fly, quote unquote, but you're also learning geography. You're learning where all the different countries are. Like there's a lot of different games with different realistic storylines that involve history and architecture and whatnot. And I've learned so much about the world just from playing games unintentionally. Like I didn't set out to actually learn any of these things. I just wanted to play a game. But
Yeah, you mentioned that, Graham, and I'm trying to remember. I'm not sure where I saw this, but it might have been Reddit. I think somebody was like, they must have been in Europe or someplace like that, and they were navigating the streets. And when one of their friends asked them, "How do they know where to go, where this
yeah,
place is?" And they said, "Oh yeah, it's from Assassin's Creed."
exactly.
They've
Yeah,
never been
yeah,
there, but because they were playing Assassin's Creed and they play that game so much, and the game itself is modeled so accurately off of a real world location,
right.
you're able to, in real life, navigate this space. So there's this incidental learning that happens with interactive media that I think has value, but navigating and highlighting and using that is a skill that is not easy, and I don't know if we can directly market it right now, but it's
Yeah.
definitely an interesting space to explore.
And also depending on the type of game, a lot of games like very much they'll challenge like your critical thinking and your logic.
Yeah, definitely.
It's not, but so, a lot of people might just think of games as, oh, it's FIFA or some shooting game, but it's a lot deeper than that, or it can be a lot deeper than that, I should say.
Yeah, you benefit a lot more because even the FIFA example, thinking about team management
That's
and that
true. Yeah,
aspect of
yeah.
it, like yeah.
But what it sort of highlights to me, though, and is it's probably the importance of teams in the game development space, especially let's say for something like that, where you're looking at whether it's education, tourism, as you say, making an education based game, something I guess to help students and children. Might not be as easy if you want to do it in a sort of fun way where somehow the actual learning is not as obvious, or you're sort of making something that somebody might want to play, and you may find that for that you need to bring a team together. I guess whether or not it, for example, in education, it might include a teacher, one or two teachers, and those who then could help to facilitate what might be the user experience, and the type of interaction that you might want to continue to foster, you the recipient, the users actually liking the game.
Mhm.
And I guess, certainly when I think of a game developer, I'm thinking about somebody who is in their bedroom or at their house, just sitting down and getting to, but probably doing it a lot by themselves, and the extent to which teams and collaboration might be endemic in that sort of culture. I was just wondering about that, outside of probably for those who really are taking game development seriously in terms of what could be a profession or something that they could make a livelihood out of.
Well, yeah, that's definitely a factor. I mean, when you mentioned the idea of a developer in his room or something to that effect, or his basement, what you're kind of modeling there is that passionate indie developer who's been working on his game alone for God knows how long. And while that idea has a certain romanticism to it, for me, and what I was trying to highlight with the finish is that finishing a game and identifying who you're trying to sell the game to is part of being a successful developer. And in trying to identify who you're selling the game to, you're going to have to be talking to various stakeholders, i.e., the team. Also covering all those skill sets that we had talked about earlier. Yeah, games that by themselves are a team effort. In fact, I was talking to somebody earlier today about a similar topic like that. Personally, I've been slowly acknowledging that even though I wear a lot of hats, I'm not doing it all myself. I'm leaning on people like Graham for feedback. I'm talking to people for quality assurance. I'm talking to other people for user feedback, direct user feedback. Like, does this make sense? Is this readable? Things like that. Those considerations that you know make good, that define good software. Like you're focusing on who's going to be playing the game rather than yourself and what you want to play. Game development is not just weird little mix there. I think Graham probably can explain it a little bit better because you have a design background. It's a design thinking I'm trying to talk about.
Hmm.
So I don't know if you want to add anything there, Graham.
It's it's so complex. I don't even know where to start, but I think you did a good job of covering a lot of it. But speaking to the team aspect of it, though, one thing that I've always thought about is if you look at companies in general, a lot of times people they'll start a company, and it might not work out, even though it's like a proven company, a proven industry. And so if you take that and add it to game development, where as far as I know, there aren't any game studios in Jamaica, are there, Glenn?
Might be one or two businesses that call themselves a game studio. I, myself being Spartan Studios being a prime example. But in terms of
Oh no,
that,
outside of individuals, I mean, like a whole team of
um,
people.
a whole team of people, not that I know, not that I know. If they exist, I'm sorry if I'm glossing over you, but I'm not aware of it.
Yeah, if you exist, please come to the JG DS and come talk to us because
Tell
yeah,
us how we're wrong.
but right, but yeah, it's then as another level of complexity because no one has done it before. No one in the Caribbean, I should say, or I should say, especially in Jamaica, because I don't know about like Trinidad or other countries, but no one has made a full game development studio before that has been that has also been successful and can do it repeatedly. And so, at least from my perspective, I'm trying to think like if you do it, if you get into the habit of releasing games by yourself, then you understand one, you understand how to release a game, you understand the different aspects of making a game, and then you can then come together and make a team. Because if I were to just go and get like a programmer, a musician, a designer, a visual artist, and a developer, and say, hey, make a game. I'm sure they could do something, but it might not be efficient, and they might not understand the whole marketing aspect of it. Even if you get a marketer, the marketer might not have ever marketed a game before or understand that whole industry. Like Glenn said, it's a lot of just reading articles, keeping up with the news, all that stuff. And so it's a challenge even to just make a whole team unless there's already experience from most of the members in that team. And then even then, the team might not work out just because of not all teams work out. So that's a big challenge from that aspect.
Understood. And before we draw this to a close, Glenn, I wanted to ask, since you seem to be very much into the business of games, and we're just talking about, business models and the fact that I think many of the games, at least from my observation, tend to be, either, completely free or using some sort of freemium model, or sorry, being free, where probably sometimes they are looking at and relying on ads for revenue, or they're using some sort of freemium model or something where you have to buy tokens and chits or something. But th- do these games actually make money outside of, like, the Angry Birds and some of these very popular titles that we have come across over the past few years?
All right. So yes, that's the short answer. Short answer is yes, they do make money. Outside of the flagship titles, we had mentioned earlier that gaming, and just to confirm it, at least according to last year's figures, gaming does combination does do more than movies and music combined, and a large chunk of that, I think, the largest chunk of that is coming from the mobile space, and the mobile space, that's your handsets, that's your phones, your Android and iOS, is dominated by that freemium, free to play type model. So yeah, they work. I think the reason they work is because everybody has a phone. It's very easy for somebody to just go ahead and download an app if it's free. The friction is very low. And what they do is by appealing to this large base of users, they get those one or two people who, are willing to spend the $10 for that, shiny cosmetic thing, right? Or are willing to, buy a battle pass so that they can get benefits to playing the game for a month. Something to also consider is that that same freemium strategy is also being used in AAA titles. I mean, I'm pretty sure that you'd have heard of Fortnite, which is big news. Like Fortnite gaming, like came out of nowhere to define this generation of gamers. But that game is free to play. That game is freemium. It makes money off of cosmetics and dances and stuff like that.
But then let me ask a question. Outside of ads, where I guess the arrangement might be a bit different, but I was thinking even for those models whereby you're depending on the users to pay, for the tokens or access to various things. How does that work, or what are there any challenges? Let's say for Jamaican developed games, when perhaps people don't not very many people or relatively few people have credit cards, or and like electronic banking, well, not so much electronic banking, but e-commerce may not be as developed and as easy as one might like.
Um,
What has been the experience and your thoughts on that?
Ironically, because of our current setup right now, in that we aren't. I'm having trouble finding the same phrase like you just had a while ago. It's not that we are unbanked, but we're not necessarily e-commerce savvy. So
Mm-hmm.
we're not willing to necessarily use a credit card on the Google Play Store. Ads and those non-transactional or non-implicit transactional monetization strategies would benefit us. I mean, one of the difficulties that we've have in Jamaica from the tech side is getting paid online, getting that transaction into our bank accounts. Google now does wire transfers, and they've done wire transfers in 2018, so you can get paid from using AdMob or any of the other ad networks to your local bank account. You can get them to send a wire transfer based off of once you pass the threshold, right? So that circumvents that issue because on PC or anything like or any of the bigger name games like that, you're gonna have a difficulty convincing a wide swath of local people to buy that because you need to go over that hurdle of having a credit card, which depending on who you're targeting may or may not be an issue, but reward ads definitely has a larger potential base, despite people not necessarily liking ads as a general.
Right, and I feel like people have found ways to make ads more palatable. Like early on, you just be playing the game, and then if you die, you just have to watch an ad. There's no reward, there's no reason. It's just boom, here's an ad. But then I don't know if Crossy Road was the first one to do it, but the first one that I remember that was successful. But essentially, the whole game is free. You don't pay for anything, and you're not watching ads to win the game. You're just watching ads to essentially unlock different cosmetic items. And so, yes, I want to watch an ad to unlock this really cool robot chicken because why not? you know? And they also get money from that. Some people don't think about, or I shouldn't say so, most people don't think about the developer and like, oh, I should watch this ad to make the developer, help the developer stay afloat. They just want the cool looking cosmetic item. And
Exactly.
so when you use ads smartly, I mean, they're still ads, so it's still annoying. But when you make the player actually choose to watch an ad as opposed to being forced to watch it, then it's like it's more palatable. Like I've definitely sat and just tapped the ad button over and over just to just to unlock different things.
hmm hmm I can second that because I remember there was a game I used to play called Terror Battle, and towards it's now closed down, but towards the end of the life of the game, they had a feature where you could watch one ad a day to earn some resource so you can unlock some characters. Best believe for a week I logged in every day to watch, right? So so yeah, yeah.
Right. Yes, it's all about how people use ads.
hmm
Okay. All right. And just, I think, my final question, and probably let's start with you, Graham. For individuals who want to get into game development, what might be key pieces of advice you would give?
Um, Definitely just start. If you're in the Caribbean, come and find our Discord. What's the link, Glenn? It's jgds.org. Is that right?
The website is jgds.org. The Discord link is there.
Yeah. So come to our Discord and be a part of the community because I firmly believe that community helps you to grow exponentially. But yeah, if you want to make a game, just go to YouTube, type in how to make a game, and there'll be a plethora of just resources for you. I think this is the easiest time it's ever been to make a game. And from start to finish, you can make a game in one day. And just by doing that, you'll understand just the cycle you have to go through. And then from there, you can just continue to make bigger and bigger things. But really and truly, just starting is the best advice I could give. And not being afraid and overwhelmed by the millions of, not millions, but the all the different jobs that could potentially go into making a game.
Glenn, what about you?
My advice is probably just, in addition to just start, is to probably start small. A lot of times people
Yes.
want to build their dream game like from the jump, and that is probably not the best way to go. Motivation is a finite resource. It can be built up over time, but you will burn yourself out if you think, oh, if you try and build your dream game from the beginning. Start small, get those quick wins, and build that muscle. I had mentioned it earlier, and the muscle really is shipping, finishing a project. It's a skill like any other skill, and it needs to be honed before you start tackling anything too large.
I guess that's as good a good a place to end, with finishing. So thank you so much, Glenn and Graham, for coming on the podcast. I mean, this has just been a very interesting discussion for me because we we all play games to some degree, and you don't necessarily think about the effort behind it. You, as you say, you probably just think of some one person sitting down, in their basement, plodding away at trying to put this together. But there's a huge industry that we in the region really haven't begun to focus on and to figure out how we might be able to leverage, especially when you have so many people who are unemployed, underemployed, educated. So and probably this could be an avenue that we could be looking at with some determined and concerted focus. However, I think hopefully this will be, a first step in that sort of direction to give people some more options as to careers that they might want to pursue, and ways we can continue to move the Caribbean region forward. So thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, it's our pleasure.
That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening to the ICT Pulse podcast. You can find links to some of the things we talked about on our website, ict-pulse.com. If you like this episode, please show your support by leaving us a review on iTunes, as it will help others find the show. You can email us at info@ict-pulse.com or drop us a note on our Facebook page, facebook.com/ICTPulse, or via Twitter @ICTPulse. We hope you'll join us again for our next episode. Take care.